This is not really the video I thought I would be making on The Witcher 3 when I started playing it a month or so ago, because by all accounts this is a game that I should have absolutely fallen in love with. From the world, the setting, to the characters, and to the fact that I really love Cyberpunk 2077, and everyone on that video I made was telling me that I really needed to play The Witcher 3. But after having completed the entirety of the main campaign, I haven't touched either of the DLCs yet, but yes, I do still plan to do that. The Witcher 3 kind of just left me feeling like it was missing something, and in particular, the way the story wrapped up really left me feeling disappointed, honestly. Now, before we continue any further, let me be clear. While I did not find myself loving this game like I thought I would, I did still enjoy my time with it overall, and I really did love parts of it. Particularly the world is something I did, ultimately fall in love with. And speaking of the world, I have read the first book, The Last Wish, and have watched some of the Netflix show, which I know is not great, but still did all that prior to playing the game and really enjoyed the world there. And after playing The Witcher 3, I really loved the world even more. Being able to walk through these lands that I had read about was an incredible experience on its own, and was easily the thing I did love the most about my time with the game. But I just didn't love the game as a whole, and I can't really pinpoint one or two even specific reasons to that, because there's, obviously with a game of this much renown, there is nothing that is truly bad or even like decent, like just, okay, that part of the game is fine. Really, I liked the majority of it and I loved parts of it, but it really just left me feeling disappointed. In fact, I had recorded a whole video talking about how much I loved this game after playing about 15 hours of it. And while I do think most of what I said there still stands, from like talking about the combat and the world feeling so alive and dense, all of those being parts I do still love, I just cannot shake how underwhelming I felt with the finale and just the way a lot of the story wrapped up overall. And I just kind of want to process that here. I'm talking about my journey with the game, even though I did get the bad ending, that aside, kind of how everything wrapped up, still just left me wanting more. I really wanted to love The Witcher 3 on the whole, and like I said, I definitely liked most of it, but at the end of the day, I did not love The Witcher 3 as much as I thought I would, and I don't really know why. So set down your silver blade and potions, and let's talk about my experience with The Witcher 3. So much like some of my commentary style content in the past, this video is going to be more of a freeform video overall, just kind of talking about the overall positives I had with the game and the negatives that really dragged some of that down for me personally. Some of my favorite missions and character moments, and of course talking about the ending and all of that entailed and why I just was really disappointed with it. And of course I will have a spoiler warning for that section, but everything aside from that will be relatively spoiler free. So the way this video is going to kind of be organized is going to be broken into both the positives and negatives that I personally kind of had with the game as a whole within the context of the story and what the game is trying to do, because I think that's really important when talking about certain mechanics. You can not really like a certain mechanic, but when you're talking about it in the context of what the game is trying to achieve, you kind of have to be like, okay, that is a good mechanic in this specific way that the developers were trying to achieve it, and what they're trying to achieve rather, but you can still not, personally like it. And I'm going to also just kind of throughout the video discuss my experience with the world of The Witcher through both some of the books and the incredible season 1 of The Witcher TV show. Too bad they didn't make any more seasons, right? So first up, I kind of want to talk about the combat. The combat is a lot simpler if you want it to be. It's very in-depth for sure, but you can also just ignore a lot of aspects of it and just hack and slash and burn everything if you want. And the combat can kind of be as in-depth as you want it to be. There's a ton of systems here at play. You can use like alchemy and potions to give yourself leg up in fights. You can, you have all your different signs, your defensive things that you have to use against certain monsters. You have your steel weapon, you have your other weapon, depending on the type of monster you're fighting. So you can utilize all of those things and feel really cool, like dodging, blasting with a certain magic sign, whatever. Or you can just go ham and try and parry and just burn everything. And I kind of do a mix of that, depending on my mood. I'm just like, I just want to chop a lot of monsters, just do that. Or if I'm like, ooh, I want to be like tactical and be like, this monster is weak to this thing, and so I got to use that or whatever. You can play that way too, which is cool, which I do really like. I think one of the things that really probably made the game popular when it came out is people probably leaned more to that side of things, like really role-playing into being a Witcher, which you can, of course, do, but I think a lot of people who pick up the game now in 2024 or whenever and don't really vibe with the combat, they're probably just hacking and slashing. One of my coworkers is actually in that position, so we've been talking as I've been playing through the game and just trying to explain, like, the combat is really in depth, but like it doesn't have to be, and you can just kind of do whatever. So it's an interesting kind of dichotomy in the combat there, but I do enjoy it, and I like just having those moments where I just get to role play as a Witcher, and also moments where I'm just slashing through monsters and men alike. It is important to note that I am using mods in some of this gameplay. Should have mentioned that at the beginning. They're only visual mods. I didn't love the oversaturated nature of a lot of the environments, which I know is like a video essayist sin, because it's like taking away from the original artist's visions, and I understand that. It just wasn't for me, and I much prefer the like darker, grittier look, and it just kind of simplified some of the UI and simplified, a couple things, whatever. So now, of course, the story and characters are incredible. They're so good. They're so good. I love these characters. The story, no spoilers here, by the way, is not that interesting overall. You have this overarching thing to try and find Ciri, and that is going to take you to 3 different towns, 3 very different towns and very different areas of the map. My favorite of which was the last one, which I wish I had done first because I probably would have really loved the game more, and that is the Isles of Skellige, that are these like massive islands with snow and big mountains and the coolest ambient music ever. It's so sick. I love it. And Yennefer's there, so that's a plus. But all of these different places you go to, you're interacting with a lot of characters trying to find Ciri. And that is the part of the game that I didn't click with initially that I absolutely have now. And I understand the character depth of Geralt and his relationships with pretty much anyone he comes across, and how you can really mold Geralt to be your own and to be a really more brash and intense Witcher, or a little more understanding depending on the situations and depending on the dialogue that you choose in each. It's a very character-driven game, which I'm not surprised considering I played Cyberpunk 2077 and made a whole video on that, which kind of jump-started a lot of this channel. So if you haven't checked it out, be sure to do that. I'm pretty proud of that one. But from that, I knew CDPR was really good at writing really interesting characters within this larger, fleshed-out world. And I really have come to love that in The Witcher. And because of this really solid characterization, it just makes me want to spend more time in the world as a whole, not just in the main story, because there's a ton of stuff, side quest wise, kind of contracts, all these things that you can do otherwise, like side quests, Witcher contracts, all these smaller things as well. But the side quests are all really good and really fleshed out as well, like with interesting characters within them, which we love. So there's a lot of things that are, of course, not bad in any ways, but when you have a game like Baldur's Gate 3 in terms of RPG elements and branching narrative choices, comparisons can get a little rough. Now, more on the negative side of things, there are quite a few things that really annoyed me more and more as I went on in the game. In particular, the combat on the whole, I enjoyed it, but like I mentioned, it was very simple, and you can ultimately play it very simple. And as much as I, tried to convince myself that I was like taking a more like methodical approach to fighting monsters, kind of like fighting machines in the Horizon series, I really at the end of the day was just dodging and attacking and occasionally throwing Ignis or like a shield on myself if I was getting hit a lot. And I don't even think I touched alchemy any times throughout my playthrough, except for when it was required through a quest, because it really isn't needed, and it's very much there, and I'm sure it would have helped me and benefited lots of quests, but I just never used it. And, it's a cool system, but when a whole system can be bypassed and not touched and you still play the game normally, I feel like there's a disconnect there, and that's not great. Speaking of disconnects, this is something that The Witcher 3 is not unique in, and a lot of games have the problem, but for the first half, really, of this game, when you're trying to find Ciri, any side quest or any optional things that would come up that even sounded interesting to do, I found it really hard to actually do them because the narrative right then is like, okay, Geralt, you need to find where Ciri is right now. And doing anything that was going off of that path just felt wrong. And even towards like the very end of the game, there's not really many options to do that. But when you're like trying to like defeat the wild hunt and all this, and then it's like, hey, you want to go track down this random monster for this random dude in the village? Like, sure, that quest probably will be cool, but I did find it very hard to convince myself to do those when this overarching narrative was in contrast to that. Another game that is kind of can be along this feeling is the newest Zelda games, where it's like, hey, defeat Ganon, or hey, go find Zelda. I would say more Tears of the Kingdom. It's like, find Zelda. Doing anything that didn't directly contribute to that main goal, even as fun as it would be, it just felt a little like disconnected, and I really felt that in the first half of The Witcher 3. Once I kind of figured out where she was and got to care more, and that was really pretty much eliminated overall. But yeah, that was just something that, it wasn't really a negative per se, but it was just kind of funny when that happens in games. With that said, I did do quite a bit in Novigrad just because I really enjoyed that city and doing stuff in there, so I guess it didn't really matter that much. Something else that didn't really matter that much, but I just, want to poke at here before we get into the overall stuff with the story and disappointment there, is the whole like tracking people Witcher sense thing is cool. I am a fan of that. However, when like 80% of quests and side quests were like, hey, track this person in the same way, it got pretty annoying. It wasn't bad when you're tracking monsters, because that kind of felt more canon in a sense, where you're trying to track these monsters' steps or smell or whatever. And people, obviously, you're doing that, but it just felt cooler with monsters. But like there's one quest where you're trying to find Dandelion, and you just have to follow his track for a really long time. And I was like, man, this is bad. Most of the time it wasn't, you're not tracking anything for an extended period of time, but it still pops up frequently enough, and nothing really changes for the most part in how you do that. So yeah, it's just something else that kind of grated on me as time went on. Speaking of quests, I do want to say I absolutely loved how often I would start a seemingly straightforward main or side quest, only for it to take multiple turns I would not have expected. Like, the game did this nearly constantly, where the beginning of a quest would be like, hey, talk to this person about this thing, and then it would kind of warp into something completely different. For example, talking to Triss, trying to find Ciri, and ending up performing in a theater act to attract the attention of a shapeshifter you need help from. Like, incredible. And that was only one part of this whole side quest chain. Another really small instance of this was, again, in Novigrad, tracking out a sewer cat who was, stealing stuff from a vendor, only to realize it was a shapeshifter again. Or trying to find an old woman and uncovering an entire tribe of kids she's kind of sort of caring for or something in the swamp with all these witch crones. Incredible. Oh, and one point that I helped this like drowner or like weird goblin sort of boy, I don't remember his name, but I helped him at one point in time, and he shows up way later in the game at a completely different area in Skellige. He just is there to like basically say hi and like kind of help point me in another direction if I need it. But I just thought that was a really cool touch. Like, I'm sure there's a ton of instances like that I totally missed out on because I did not do that many side quests. Like, really. I pretty much mainlined the main story for some of the reasons I touched on with kind of the disconnection, and I was just, interested in the main story. So, but I know there's a lot of main side quests, so if there's any in particular you think I, really should experience, let me know, and I will potentially go back and do them. Because I know that's a big part of this game that I definitely did not experience all of. Okay, so now I just really need to kind of vent and talk about why the ending and everything was just so disappointing for me. So, big spoiler warning here for the ending of the game, particularly most of the entirety of the final mission of The Witcher 3. You've been warned. So we're just going to hop right into it. Okay, so, man, the final mission I'm still so mixed on because it is simultaneously so sick and so disappointing. It was so much happening on screen when you're rushing to after you've defeated the wild hunt, and you're rushing to catch up with Ciri and the elf guy, I don't remember his name. There's so much happening that my game literally did crash twice, actually. I just had to turn down some settings. All these monsters are spawning from other dimensions because the kind of conjunction of spheres, more or less, is kind of happening. At least I believe that's what this is. They don't actually say that specifically, but I'm fairly certain that's what is supposed to be going on. So all these monsters from other dimensions and other worlds are spawning in. You're just trying to get to Ciri, and you're running through on horseback with Yennefer. So sick. But like prior to that, the final fight with like the final dude from the Wild Hunt was so sick. You're on the ice. Big fan. I loved this mission, 90% of it. It was the big climactic kind of thing I was hoping for until the very end, where Ciri, you talk with Ciri, and she's like, I gotta go defeat the frost, and so our world and other worlds don't get annihilated. Understandable. She goes on, and there's really, I don't think, I could be wrong on this, do not think there's any version of this where she just doesn't do that. I tried to get her to be like, hey, maybe don't go, and she's like, nah, I'm going. It's like, all right, whatever. She goes through the portal, and you see her on some world, and then that's technically it. It cuts to, at least in my version, it cut to like a couple weeks, I think, later. Geralt just out doing his monster hunting thing, and I'll get into the bad ending in a minute. However, I went and looked up the quote-unquote canon good ending, because a lot of my disappointment did come from me getting the bad ending of the game, where Geralt's hunting for the last witch that stole Ciri's medallion, and he just goes kind of on a rampage, which was kind of cool, honestly. I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, Geralt's like unhinged, he's, emotional, which he really never really is for the most part, and then he kills the crone, sorry, not the witch, and then basically lets himself die. It's heavily implied. He's sitting in this old house, and all these monsters are converging on him, and he just sits in despair, and then credits roll. Mostly, there's a cutscene going over the state of the world and stuff, but essentially that was it. Which, on one hand, I do really like that concept, and CDPR is really good, as I know from Cyberpunk 2077, at writing poignant, sad, not good endings, and that's definitely what this was. So on one hand, I appreciate the storytelling aspect of it, but on the other hand, all these feelings and disappointment that kind of peppered throughout the game so far really came to a head with me getting that ending. So my initial reaction was just like so disappointing, guys. Like it was not great. I'm pretty sure I just booted up another game to kind of just refresh my palate a little and get my mind off the disappointing side of things, because even when I was playing, I was like, okay, this is kind of cool concept, but I was just very let down on this end. And then we have the canon good ending. Like I mentioned, I went and looked up stuff because, okay, so one of the things I really wanted to see, I romanced Yennefer. I don't know if I mentioned that yet, but I romanced Yennefer, and I wanted to kind of ride off in the sunset with her if everything went well, which in the good ending, that does happen. Super cool. Ciri doesn't die. Ciri doesn't just straight up leave. She kind of comes back somehow. We don't see that, which sucks in my opinion. I wish we could have seen what she went through, and we could have played through that finale and then had her come back, become a Witcher, and then Geralt and Yennefer go out and retire, essentially. My problem with even this good ending, if I'm looking it up and watching it, I don't know if anyone else had felt this way, but you don't actually see Geralt and Yennefer. You still got to see this kind of like animatic type cutscene, which I do appreciate, and is very, very good. At least it wasn't nothing, but I wish it would have been a fully animated and fully like cutscene-ified. That's a word that I'm going with and I just made up. It wasn't that. It was more of this kind of animatic sort of thing, which again, I like, is cool, but I wanted to see these characters and see their faces and all that I'd come to love and come to had relationships with or not, and actually see the impact of the kingdom of and all the things, and but I am glad even in that ending it was like, hey, Ciri's back, she's becoming a Witcher, and Geralt and Yennefer just get to go live a little happy life in their own little cabin away from fighting monsters and sorceresses. Which we love. Like, that is so wholesome, and that's what I wanted. And I did think that would also be the case in the quote-unquote bad ending, even though Ciri was gone or whatever. I was like, okay, they'll still show Geralt going off with Yennefer. At least that is a benefit. That wasn't the case, which sucked. But a lot of my disappointment was just in a lot of character stuff not being directly wrapped up in ways, or not even wrapped up, just like touched on outside of that animatic. I definitely appreciate what they did do, and I'm sure at the time when this game had come out, and even a little since then, people were like, oh, this is like a great kind of way to wrap things up. But man, it just let me down. It just really let me down. And there's no real reason for it. I just didn't think the ending on the whole stuck the landing. Like I said, the final mission, how it was wrapping everything up, how it was utilizing all these characters and all these things was really good overall, but it just didn't stick the landing. Arguably, I liked the spoiler warning again here, big spoiler warning for the middle of the game. The end of, I think it was technically the end of Act 1, like the assault on Kaer Morhen with Vesemir dying and Ciri like going like crazy. That mission was what on the whole, I wanted this final mission to be, and it really was for the most part. But that mission really was like a cementing consequences and things happening, and like, okay, propelling the rest of the story. Which, first of all, that mission on the whole, incredible. Absolutely love that mission. The way it dealt with all the characters throughout the entirety of the mission, not just parts of it, is what I wish the final campaign mission would have done. With all of that said, like I stated at the top of this video, I did really like The Witcher 3. I just thought I would love it, because I love medieval games, I love high fantasy, and I love really in-depth characters. And The Witcher 3 had all of that, but I just didn't love it. And, you know, it really sucks, and I just want to make this video kind of venting and sharing my experience with the game, and I hope there's at least one or two people that had shared this experience as well. But if not, if you're like, I adore every single part of this game and you're wrong, please let me know, kindly. But I would love to hear people's experiences with the game, especially like in more recent years, and their experience and journey with it. But hey, now I can at least say that I have played and finished the main Witcher 3 story, which of course I will get to its DLC someday. For now, I, you know, might just start one more playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077 and continue to put off playing Red Dead Redemption 2. But we'll deal with that another day. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, all the things. Thank you for listening and coming along with my journey and experience with The Witcher 3, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.